Blacks and whites may experience integration in the workplace, but by and large, their neighborhoods are still segregated. When blacks start moving into a more affluent suburb, the result is still something called white flight. Tonight in a special edition of Dateline NBC entitled, "Why Can't We Live Together?" Tom Brokaw tries to find some answers to that question in the Chicago suburb of Madison, Illinois. Tom, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning. Well, it seems to me that some of the most complex questions that we face in society can really be addressed by raising the simple questions of why can't we live together? Madison, Illinois was an all-white suburb in the far south suburbs of Chicago. And a few years ago, a developer put up some very nice homes there, and lo and behold, the black professionals from Chicago and the black middle and upper middle class began to move in. And the city had really never experienced that kind of integration before. There was an immediate wave of white flight. Then it stabilized. But now steadily it is becoming a more and more black community and less a white community.
But when whites move out generally in something called white flight, they say it's because of class, not race.
Right.
Here you have middle-class blacks moving in, yet they're still moving out.
These black families brought with them their families, their values, their church-going, their commitment to the public schools. They have the same values as anybody else who lives in that community in terms of what they want for their children, for their own lives. And yet there was just a comfort level that a lot of white families could not achieve. And a lot of it had to do, we discovered, with simple stereotypes or with rumors that were on the streets about what was happening or what might happen.
Before we get to what the people actually had to say, the one thing you notice about this report, you don't go out and interview sociologists and urban planners and psychologists. Talk to the people.
We stayed away from that. We really talked to white residents and to black residents, and we tried to get at that simple question, why can't we live together? In the end, what we found is there's an enormous amount of frustration on both sides because the people who did leave, the white families who left, understand that they don't have the answer either, and they were not always comfortable with the explanations that they had for their departure.
In many ways, some of the frustrations result from fear, just plain and simple. Let's hear what one person had to say.
White assumptions about blacks are deeply ingrained. Here's a familiar example. The sight of white teenagers hanging out is not nearly as suspicious or as threatening as black teenagers doing exactly the same thing.
The teenagers, frequently they meet in much larger groups, which becomes a very intimidating factor. And,
But if you went to the mall and you saw a group of black teenagers at one end of the mall, you'd have one reaction.
Right.
Than you would if you saw a group of white teenagers at the other end of the mall.
I would, mainly because there'll be more of them generally, and they'll be louder.
Like if you went up to the convenience store, it was kind of a scary experience. I didn't feel comfortable getting out of my car and going in.
We went with Sally Formas to a convenience store in Madison. Most of the shoppers we saw were black. That was true also in the big shopping center, Lincoln Mall, in the heart of Madison's middle-class neighborhoods.
I don't feel safe to come here anymore.
Why?
Because of the clientele. I don't feel safe in the parking lot here.
Did you ever get hassled here?
No.
Did you ever have any bad experiences?
No.
Do you know anyone for a fact who did have any bad experiences?
No, I did not.
The problem then is myth versus reality here. Let's talk about some of the real concerns that people tell you they have when they move out of a neighborhood. They say property values are going to go down and crime's going to go up and the school systems will suffer. In Madison, how has the influx of minorities affected those three things?
In all three cases, there is no hard evidence that property values have gone down. In fact, they've gone up, according to most real estate agents. The school test scores are about the same as they were before. What happens is that people begin to react to what they think may happen. Now, in fairness, a lot of these white families who did stay then began to think, gee, if I'm the last white family on this block, my whole net worth is tied up in this house. I'm probably not going to be able to get the money out of it that I should. Maybe I ought to leave now. And a lot of these white families that we talked to said that they had some very good friends who were black neighbors, but they didn't know who would move in next. So then I would say to them, but now you're going to move to an all-white neighborhood, and you may get a white neighbor who turns out to be an all-American jerk.
Right.
What have you traded off here? And they said, no, I get what you're talking about.
When you talk to the African Americans who lived in Madison and you asked them how did they feel about the whites fleeing, what did they tell you?
Well, a lot of them said, all right, fine. If they don't want to live next to me, that's their decision. I'm happy where I am. I've worked hard to get what I have, and if somebody wants to move in next door to me, I'll take them on their terms. Most of the black families, I think, felt that way. A little bit of a chip, and it's understandable. But a number of them are also working to bring white families into the community. The problem is now that it's at about 50-50, is that for every one white family looking for a home in Madison, there are 25 black families looking for a home in Madison. So most of the people that we talked to thought it would only go one way.
Despite what they say to you, there's a sense of sadness, I know, in some of the people. We have an example of that.
The old cliche, there goes the neighborhood, it's alive and well.
Henry Swan, an insurance company executive, was one of Madison's first black residents. Since he moved here 20 years ago, his subdivision has turned 90% black. But it's no ghetto.
If you drove through when there's nobody around, I would defy you to say who lives in the community. You wouldn't be able to tell. You wouldn't be able to tell.
It's called Why Can't We Live Together? It's a special edition of Dateline NBC. It's tonight at 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock Central Time. Tom, good to see you.
Thanks, Matt.
We'll be back in a moment. This is Today on NBC.